It was supposed to be a routine evening, one of those quiet shifts where the biggest excitement is a broken taillight or a minor noise complaint. I was parked near a dimly lit gas station, sipping on coffee that had gone lukewarm, when I noticed them. Two men dressed sharp but trying a little too hard. Their suits were crisp, but something about the way they carried themselves didn't sit right with me. I've dealt with real authority figures before. Feds, detectives, higher-ups from different agencies. And these guys? They didn't have that air of quiet confidence. Instead, they had something else, something forced, like actors playing a role they hadn't quite mastered. I took another slow sip of my coffee, watching as they stepped out of a black sedan parked haphazardly near the entrance. No plates, not a good sign. They walked with purpose, scanning the area like they owned it. One of them, a stocky guy with slicked back hair, pulled out a phone and started talking loudly like he wanted to be overheard. No, wheel handle, it. They don't know who they're dealing with, he said, pacing near the pumps. The second guy, taller, leaner, stood with his hands in his pockets, eyes darting around like he was sizing people up. When his gaze landed on me, he hesitated, just for a second. That was enough. I've been in law enforcement long enough to recognize that moment. That tiny flicker of hesitation when someone wonders if they should be worried. I set my coffee down on the dashboard and stepped out of my cruiser. The air was thick with the smell of gasoline and distant rain. I adjusted my belt, keeping my stance casual. As I walked toward them, their conversation abruptly stopped. Stocky guy tucked his phone away. Tall guy straightened his jacket. For a brief moment we just stood there sizing each other up. "Evening, gentlemen," I said, keeping my tone polite but firm. "Everything all right?" Stocky guy offered a smirk, the kind that was meant to establish dominance. "Yeah, officer. Just conducting official business." "Official, huh?" I glanced at the sedan again. No government tags, no insignia. Just black on black, the kind of car you see in movies when the bad guys want to look important. Tall guy finally spoke, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "We're with an agency, nothing to concern yourself with." That was it. No name, no credentials, just an agency. I nodded slowly, pretending to buy it. But inside, every instinct was firing off. This was going to be interesting. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. I've dealt with my fair share of power plays before, guys trying to puff up their chests, act like they're untouchable. But these two? They were different. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. It wasn't confidence. It was performance. Stocky guy shifted his stance slightly, angling his body between me and the sedan. A subtle move, but I caught it. It told me one thing. There was something in that car they didn't want me to see. Tall guy was still staring. Me down, arms crossed, that little smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "We're conducting federal business," he said, voice even, like he'd given this line 100 times before. I let the words hang in the air for a second, studying them. Federal business, but no badges, no agency name, no protocol. If they were real, they would have already flashed credentials before I even had to ask. "All right," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Which agency?" Stocky guy exhaled sharply, like I just asked him to recite the Constitution. "It's classified." Classified. "Right. See, here's the thing," I said, shifting my weight slightly, keeping my hands loose near my belt. "You don't just get to say classified and expect people to stop asking questions. Even the real feds carry ID. I looked between them. "So, how about we start over? Who are you, really?" That's when tall guy took a step closer. Not aggressive, not enough to be a direct threat, but enough to make a point. Intimidation. I've been in law enforcement long enough to know that when people start trying to intimidate, it usually means one thing. They're stalling. "Look, officer," he dragged out the word, like he was debating whether I even deserve the title. "I get that you've got a job to do, but so do we. If you interfere, you could be obstructing a federal operation." There it was. The first real push. I kept my expression unreadable, but inside, I was taking mental notes. They weren't just trying to act official, they were trying to scare me off. That meant whatever they were doing here, It wasn't just some con. It was bigger. Stocky guy checked his watch. A nervous habit, or was he waiting for something? Obstruction, huh? I said, letting out a slow breath. You know what's funny? Real federal agents don't talk like that. Real federal agents know that local. Law enforcement is an asset, not an obstacle. I tilted my head. But you? You just want me to walk away. Neither of them spoke. But I saw it, the flicker of tension in their shoulders, the barely there glance they exchanged. They were slipping. A gust of wind picked up, rustling the loose flyers taped to the gas station's windows. The air smelled like rain. The whole street was quiet. Too quiet. Something was wrong. I shifted slightly, making sure I had a clear view of their car. Tinted windows. No movement inside. But there was something in that back seat. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. All right, I said, forcing a sigh like I was backing off. I get it. You guys are busy. I'll leave you to it. Stocky guy relaxed just a little. Tall guy's smirk returned. I took a step back, then casually added, Mind if I just run your plates before I go? The shift in their demeanor was instant. Tall guy's jaw tensed. Stocky guy's fingers twitched at his side, like he was debating his next move. That was the moment I knew. Whatever was happening here, I had just stepped into something far bigger than a simple lie. For a moment, no one spoke. The air between us thickened, heavy with the weight of a decision neither of them seemed ready to make. Then, tall guy stepped forward, just enough to close the space between us. Not quite a threat, but enough to make sure I felt his presence. His smirk had hardened into something colder, more deliberate. You don't need to run the plates, he said smoothly, his voice dripping with forced authority. We're on a classified operation. You interfering could compromise national security. National security. Right. Stocky guy folded his arms, nodding as if to back up the claim. I suggest you move along, officer. We wouldn't want this. To escalate. Escalate. Interesting choice of words. I leaned against my patrol car like I had all the time in the world. Oh, I get it. Big important guys doing big important work. I tilted my head. So, let's do this the easy way. Flash. Me your credentials and I'll be on my way. Tall guy didn't even blink. That's not how this works. I let out a short, amused breath. Oh, and how exactly does it work? Stocky guy sighed, acting like he was dealing with an inconvenience rather than a cop. Look, he said, lowering his voice. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this. We're working directly with Homeland. If you don't step away, I can have your badge pulled before your next coffee break. There it was, the threat. I let that settle for a beat, watching them. They weren't just lying, they were doubling down, pushing it as far as they could. That meant one of two things. Either they were reckless, or they were desperate. Smiled, slow and measured. See, now I'm really curious. Homeland Security, huh? Funny because I work closely with a few DHS agents. Maybe I should call one. Let them know you're here. Stocky guy's jaw twitched. Tall guy still held his ground, but the shift in his posture told me everything I needed to know. They were bluffing. I decided to push. You know what's weird? I continued casually. You guys don't move like feds. You don't talk like feds. And real government officials don't threaten local law enforcement. You'd know that if you were legit. For the first time, tall guy's smirk faltered. Bingo. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. You're making a mistake, he said, voice low and deliberate. This is bigger than you. Bigger than this town. If you keep pressing, you won't like where this ends. It was a hell of a line. Almost convincing. Almost. I let out a short chuckle, shaking my head. See, you keep talking in circles, but you're not giving me anything real. I gestured toward the sedan. No plates, no badges, no paperwork. Just two guys trying way too hard to sell a story. Tall guy exhaled, slowly, like he was debating his next move. Then he pulled out a black leather wallet and flipped it open in one smooth motion. Inside was a worn-looking ID card, laminated but faded. It looked official, at least at first glance. I took my time inspecting it, noting the details. It had no holographic seal, no watermark. The photo was slightly off-center, and the text was printed rather than embossed. A fake, but a good fake. I whistled, handing it back. That's impressive. Must have cost a pretty penny. Tall guy's smirk returned. Must be frustrating, huh? Knowing you don't have clearance for this. I could have called him out right then and there. Could have pulled out my radio, called for backup. Instead, I smiled. Played along. Because now I wanted to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. I nodded. All right, I get it. Classified work, right? I'll back off, for now. I took a step away, keeping my hands in clear view. But, tell me something. If I look into this car, am I going to find something that Homeland Security wouldn't want me to see? That flicker of tension was back, sharp and immediate. Tall guy didn't answer. Stocky guy's fingers twitched at his side. And just like that, I knew. They weren't just pretending to have authority. They were protecting something they couldn't afford for me to find. For the first time that night, I felt it. A small sliver of doubt. These guys were good. Too good. The fake badge, the measured arrogance, the unwavering confidence. It was textbook deception, but something about the way they carried themselves made me hesitate. I'd dealt with conmen before. I'd dealt with actual federal agents before. These guys sat in a strange in-between. Convincing, but not quite right. What if, just for a second, I was wrong? What if they actually did have some power? What if this was one of those weird, shadowy operations you only hear whispers about? Maybe I had just stepped into something way above my pay grade. Or maybe that's exactly what they wanted me to think. Tall guy studied me, like he could sense my hesitation. He leaned in, just slightly, lowering his voice. You're not stupid, officer. You know when to walk away. Stocky guy chimed in, his voice calmer now, like he was offering me a way out. This doesn't have to be complicated. You're a smart man. You do your job. We do ours. Let's keep it that way. They were pushing harder now, doubling down, reinforcing the illusion. They wanted me to doubt myself. I wasn't playing that game. I folded my arms, pretending to consider. All right. Let's say I believe you. Let's say you really are working with Homeland. I nodded toward their car. You're driving an unregistered vehicle. No government plates, no tracking tags. That's unusual, isn't it? Tall guy didn't blink. It's an off-book operation. Right, I said, acting like I was buying it. And off-book means no credentials? No paperwork? Stocky guy took a step closer. You don't need to worry about that. I let out a low whistle. See, now I'm even more curious. If this is real, why not just call it in? I've got my radio right here. I tapped the mic on my shoulder. One quick call to HQ, and I can clear all this up. Silence. A second too long. Just enough time for them to realize I wasn't letting this go. Tall guy's expression hardened. That would be a very bad idea. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? And why's that? Stocky guy exhaled sharply, like he was done playing. Because, he said, his voice low and deliberate, some things don't belong on police channels. That was a hell of a line. A threat, wrapped in mystery. It was also bullshit. I held his gaze, searching for a crack in the facade, but they were steady. Too steady. Their whole act was riding on one thing, making me doubt myself just enough to back off. It almost worked. Almost. Instead, I took a slow step back, pretending to reconsider. All right, I said, shrugging. If you say so. For a split second, I saw it, relief. They thought they'd won. They thought I was walking away. That's when I decided to push one last time. I tilted my head, keeping my voice casual. Just one more thing. If this is so classified, why are you making such a scene in the middle of a gas station? That was it. The mask cracked. Just a little. Tall guy's jaw tensed. Stocky guy shifted uncomfortably. And in that moment, I knew. They weren't in control of this situation. I was. The moment I asked why they were making such a scene in the middle of a gas station, the dynamic shifted. Tall guy's smirk faded, his eyes narrowing just a fraction. Stocky guy shifted his weight like he suddenly wanted to be anywhere. But here, they didn't expect that question. It was a simple detail, one that real agents would have had an answer for without hesitation. But these guys, they weren't used to being questioned. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm under the weight of their own deception. Then, Tall guy recovered. Too quickly. We don't owe you an explanation, he said smoothly. You've already been told this is classified. You keep pushing and it won't end well for you. There it was again. The threat. They were running out of ways to play their game, so now they were leaning into intimidation. I took a slow step closer, dropping my voice just enough to match his. See, that's where you messed up. Real federal agents don't threaten cops. Tall guy's expression didn't change, but I saw it. The tiniest flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He knew I had him. Stocky guy sighed loudly, acting like I was the problem here. Look, officer, we don't have time for this. You don't need to be involved. Don't I? I crossed my arms. Because last I checked, I'm still the only real authority figure standing here. I let the words sink in before shifting my gaze between them. And speaking of things not adding up, mind-telling. Me why your badge is missing a federal seal. That did it. Stocky guy stiffened. Tall guy's jaw locked. I pressed on. See, I was willing to let that slide at first, but then I noticed something else. When you pulled out your ID earlier, it didn't have the texture that real federal badges have. That's because real government agencies use UV watermarking and embossed seals. Yours? Just laminated paper. Tall guy didn't flinch, but I could feel the shift in the air. They knew they were cornered. And you know what really got me? I continued, stepping in just a little closer. Homeland Security doesn't drive unregistered sedans with no plates. And if you really had clearance, you would have shut me down with one call? I leaned in. But you didn't, because you can't. The silence that followed was thick. For the first time, they weren't talking. They weren't doubling down. They were waiting. For what? That's when I realized. They were stalling. And suddenly, I knew exactly why. I took a slow step back, keeping my eyes locked on them. You two aren't waiting for me to back off, I said, my voice calm but firm. You're waiting for something else. Stocky guy's fingers twitched at his side. Not a nervous tick, a tell. My pulse kicked up a notch. They weren't just two con men trying to scam their way through a lie. They were protecting something, and whatever it was inside that car. I exhaled slowly, shifting my stance just enough to get a better angle on the vehicle. The windows were tinted, the interior completely obscured. But now I could hear something. A faint rustling. Something, or someone, was inside. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, every instinct was firing at once. This wasn't just a bluff anymore. This was a crime scene. I reached for my radio. Dispatch, I need backup at my location. Unmarked black sedan, 2 suspicious individuals. That's when Tall Guy moved, fast, too fast, and suddenly, everything snapped into motion. The second my hand touched my radio, Tall Guy lunged, fast, too fast. I barely had time to react before he grabbed my wrist, shoving my arm down to stop the transmission. Instinct took over. I twisted, breaking his grip, my other hand already reaching for my sidearm. Back off! I barked, my voice sharp, commanding. Stocky Guy tensed, his eyes darting between me and Tall Guy, his mind racing. They knew the game was up. Whoa, hold on, Tall Guy said, stepping back, his hands up, palms out. The sudden shift in demeanor was almost laughable. 1 second he was trying to muscle me. The next, he was all fake innocence. We don't want trouble, Stocky Guy added quickly. This is just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Right, because guys with fake badges, an unmarked car, and someone stuffed in the back seat were just out for a late-night drive. I kept my stance firm, my hand still on my holstered weapon. You just assaulted an officer, I said, voice steady. You think that's gonna fly? Tall Guy shook his head, forcing a chuckle. A desperate attempt to regain control. Come on, officer. No need to escalate. Let's just talk. Talk? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Because 5 minutes ago you were threatening me. Now you want to talk? Stocky Guy stepped forward, slow, measured. Too measured. Something was coming. I tightened my grip, my muscles coiled. Every nerve in my body told me they were about to make a move. You don't understand what you're getting involved in, Tall Guy said, his voice low, almost a whisper. If you don't walk away, it's not just gonna be bad for us. It's gonna be bad for you. The threat was back. But now Now it had weight. Now I could hear something behind it, fear. Not just the fear of getting caught, fear of something bigger. That was new. I held my ground. "Last chance," I said, my voice firm. "Hands where I can see them." "Now," tall guy exhaled through his nose, a flicker of something dark crossing his face. "You don't want to do this." I let out a dry laugh. "You really think you're still in control here?" Stocky guy's fingers twitched at his side. A habit. A tell. That's when I realized he was reaching for something. Weapon. Move. Before I could process the thought, my training kicked in. I dropped my stance, my hand flying to my gun just as Stocky guy moved. "Don't." Too late. His hand darted into his jacket. I drew. "Freeze!" Everything happened at once. Stocky guy froze, his hand hovering near his waistband. He wasn't holding a gun, not yet, but tall guy? His eyes had gone cold, calculating. They weren't going to go quietly. I had seconds, maybe less, before they made their move. I adjusted my grip, keeping my voice steel hard. Slow, hands in the air. Now, Stocky guy hesitated just for a second. Then, sirens. Distant at first, but closing in. The moment they heard it, the shift was immediate. Panic. Real panic. Whatever these guys were involved in, they couldn't afford to be arrested. Tall guy's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked to the car. He was about to run. I couldn't let that happen. I took a step forward, closing the distance. Don't even think about it. For the first time all night, they weren't the ones in control. I was, and they knew it. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the tension like a blade. Backup was almost here, and these guys knew it. Tall guy's eyes darted toward the black sedan. A split-second calculation. Could he make it? Could he grab whatever was inside before I stopped him? I wasn't about to give him the chance. Don't. Move! I ordered. Gun still steady in my grip. For the first time that night, I saw it. Real panic. Not the frustration of being caught in a lie. Not the arrogance of a con man who thinks he can talk his way out. Real, gut-deep fear. They weren't just afraid of getting arrested. They were afraid of what happened next. That's when I knew this was bigger than them, whatever was in that car. It wasn't just evidence. It was a secret. A dangerous one. I took a careful step toward the sedan, eyes never leaving them. What's in the car? Neither of them answered. I nodded to myself. All right, guess I'll find out. Tall guy lunged. Not for a weapon. Not to attack me. For the car, I was faster. I shoved him hard, sending him stumbling backward just as the first squad car screeched onto the lot. Doors flew open. Officers poured out. Hands up! Down on the ground! Stocky guy dropped fast, hands spread wide on the pavement. Tall guy hesitated for half a second too long. That was all it took. Within seconds, an officer slammed him against the hood of a squad car, wrenching his arms behind his back. It was over, but I wasn't done yet. I turned to the black sedan, heart pounding, instinct screaming. Something was in there. Something worth lying for. Worth running for. I reached for the handle, pulse hammering. Then, movement, a sound, a muffled cry. My stomach dropped. I yanked the door open, and there, bound, gagged, eyes wide with terror, was a girl, young, no older than 17, wrists zip-tied, tear-streaked face. This wasn't just a con. This was a kidnapping. For a split second, I couldn't breathe. I had almost walked away, almost let them talk me down. Instead, I had stayed, pushed, and because of that, she was alive. The weight of it hit me hard, but I didn't let it show. I moved fast, pulling my knife from my belt and slicing through the restraints. She sobbed as I pulled the gag from her mouth, her voice shaking. They said no one would stop them, that they were gonna. They won't, I said firmly, helping her out of the car. You're safe now. Behind me, tall guy wasn't smirking anymore. His face was white. Because now, he wasn't just caught in a lie, he was going away for life. The cuffs clicked shut. Tall guy didn't struggle, didn't say a word. His hands were locked behind his back, his head hung low, his smirk gone. Stocky guy sat on the curb, his face in his hands, like he had finally accepted that this was over. Because it was. The girl, the reason all of this happened, was wrapped in a blanket now. Sitting in the back of an ambulance, sipping water with trembling hands. She was safe. And me? I stood there, watching it all, letting the weight of it settle. These men had walked into this gas station like they owned the world, like they could flash fake badges and bark out empty threats and expect people to fold. And maybe, most nights, they were right. How many times had this worked before? How many people had backed down, afraid to question them? The thought made my stomach turn. Authority is a dangerous thing, not just the real kind, but the illusion of it. These men had used fake power, and people had believed them, but not tonight. Tonight, they lost. I took one last look at Tall Guy before they shoved him into the squad car. He met my eyes. For the first time, he wasn't pretending. He knew it too. They thought they had authority, until they met someone who actually did. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. Don't forget to tap the bell icon to stay updated. Let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Your support means the world.